You wake up to shouting, not the ordinary kind, not a hunt being argued over, not a child being scolded, not two people fighting about a share of meat. This is different. This is the sound a camp makes when something has broken and cannot be put back. A man is dead, and everyone here already knows who killed him. There are no police, there is no crime scene, no tape, no laboratory, no fingerprint file, no camera watching from a pole across the street. There is a circle of about 30 people who have known each other since the day they were born. A body on the ground, and a fire that is going to burn all night. By tomorrow, this will be finished. Not investigated. Finished. For roughly 300,000 years, this was the only justice system your species had. No courts, no prisons, no written law, and it held together well enough that every single one of your ancestors lived inside it, generation after generation, all the way down to you. So how do you solve a murder with nothing? Start with the oldest one anyone has ever found. In northern Spain, there is a limestone cave system called Atapuerca, and inside it, a 13-meter vertical shaft that drops into a hidden chamber. The chamber has a name, Cima de los Huesos, the pit of bones. At the bottom lie the remains of at least 28 individuals, around 430,000 years old. One skull stands out. It is cataloged as Cranium 17, rebuilt out of 52 separate fragments. Above the left eye, there are 2 holes. In 2015, a team led by the paleoanthropologist Nohemi Sala published their analysis of that skull in the journal PLOS One. 2 impacts. The same weapon both times because the fractures share an identical outline. 2 different angles, both delivered by someone standing face to face with him. A fall gives you 1 wound. 2 wounds means somebody swung twice. That is the earliest known murder in the human record, and it happened long before modern humans existed. But look at where the body ended up. He is at the bottom of a shaft, in a chamber nobody lived in, stacked with 27 others. He did not walk down there. Somebody carried him. The oldest murder ever found may also be the oldest funeral ever found. Does that sound like a species without rules? Move forward 400,000 years and the picture sharpens. In 1991, 2 hikers found a body frozen into a glacier on the border between Italy and Austria. You know him as Ötzi the Iceman. He died about 5,300 years ago. For a decade, everyone assumed the mountain killed him. Then, in 2001, the radiologist Paul Gostner spotted something on a CT scan that had been missed. A flint arrowhead, buried in his left shoulder, having torn through a major artery underneath his collarbone. He bled out in minutes. On his right hand, there was a deep defensive cut, already partly healed, meaning he had fought someone else a few days earlier. His copper axe was still with him. His bow, his quiver, his tools. All of it left on the body. Nobody robbed him. Somebody hunted him. But here is the wall that archaeology always runs into. Bones give you the victim. Bones never give you the verdict. A skull can tell you a man was struck twice. It cannot tell you who was blamed, what was demanded, or how the camp went on eating together afterwards. For that, you need to look at the societies that were still living this way when anthropologists arrived with notebooks. In the 1960s, the anthropologist Richard Lee lived with the Jew/Hwansi of the Kalahari Desert and recorded their history of lethal violence. Between 1920 and 1955, he documented 22 killings. Not one of them was solved by evidence. Read that again. Not one. Because in a camp of 25 people, the question of who did it is almost never a mystery. There is nowhere to stand where you are not seen. There is no alibi because there is no privacy. Everyone eats within 20 meters of everyone else. The killer is usually still standing there. So the question was never who. The question was what happens now, and the honest answer is that the murderer was rarely the real danger. The real danger was the dead man's brother. That is the thing your ancestors were actually solving for. One killing invites a second killing. The second invites a third. Anthropologists call this the blood feud. And when the researchers Karen Erickson and Heather Horton surveyed societies across the world in 1992, they found kin group vengeance to be the norm rather than the exception. A feud does not stop on its own. A feud eats a camp from the inside until there is no camp left. So the whole system aims at one target. Not truth, not punishment. Stopping the next death. Here is how they did it. The first tool was talk, and there was an enormous amount of it, days of it. Everyone in the camp speaks, including the women, including the young. The anthropologist Polly Wisner, who has studied Jew/Huanzi conversation in detail, found that daytime talk was dominated by complaint, criticism, and the settling of grievances, while the night belonged to stories. Disputes were daylight work. The camp argued its way toward a shared version of events out loud in the open until there was only one version left standing. That is not a trial in your sense. It is closer to a trial by exhaustion. The second tool was payment. In much of the ancient world, a life had a published price. Anglo-Saxon law called it vergild, literally the man price, and it was scaled by rank and paid to the family, not to any king. Among the Nuer of South Sudan, the anthropologist E. Evans Pritchard described a specialist for exactly this situation, the leopard skin chief. A man who had killed would run to the chief's homestead, which was sanctuary. Nobody could touch him there. Then the chief would spend weeks walking between the two families, negotiating cattle, usually dozens of head, until the dead man's kin agreed to accept animals instead of blood. And the chief had no army, no power to arrest anyone. His only weapon was the threat of a curse and the fact that both families needed him to be neutral. His weakness was the entire point. A judge who cannot win is a judge everyone can accept. The third tool is the one that gets laughed at, and it should not be. When the camp genuinely could not agree, they turned the decision over to something outside themselves. Evans Pritchard also documented the Azande poison oracle in Central Africa, in which a substance called benj is fed to a chicken while a question is put to it out loud. The bird lives or dies, and that is the answer. Superstition? Look at what it actually produces. The economist Peter Leeson analyzed medieval European trial by ordeal in the Journal of Law and Economics in 2012 and found something uncomfortable. Where people truly believed the ordeal revealed guilt, the guilty tended to confess or settle rather than face it, and the innocent walked in willingly. The ordeal was not a lie detector. It was a machine for producing a decision that both sides had agreed in advance to obey. Your courts do the same thing with a jury of 12 strangers. The mechanism changed. The purpose did not. And when nothing worked, there was the last resort. The anthropologist Christopher Boehm, who has spent his career studying how hunter-gatherer bands control the aggressive and the dangerous, describes the pattern. A man who kills repeatedly, who cannot be shamed, who cannot be paid off becomes a problem the whole band quietly agrees on. The consensus builds in whispers, over weeks, at fires, in pairs, until nobody disagrees. Then it is carried out. But look at who carries it out. In his 1954 study of law in small societies, the legal anthropologist E. Adamson Hobel recorded that among some Inuit groups, the man chosen to execute the killer was a close relative of the killer himself. His brother, his cousin, his own father. Sit with that for a second. If a stranger does it, the dead man's family owes revenge and the feud continues. If his own brother does it, nobody is owed anything. The debt closes inside one family and the camp survives. That is not savagery, that is engineering. So, let's reconstruct the morning. The shouting has died down. The body has been moved. The killer is sitting apart from the fire, not tied up, not guarded, because there is nowhere on earth for him to go. His brother sits beside him without speaking. The dead man's family sits on the far side of the camp, and someone has quietly walked off with every poisoned arrow in the place because Richard Lee described exactly that reflex. When a fight begins, bystanders grab the weapons and hold the fighters down. Then the talking starts. It goes all day. It goes the next day too. Eventually, somebody old enough to be listened to says a number, and there is a long silence, and then the dead man's brother nods. Nobody has been arrested, nobody has been proven guilty, and the case is closed. Now, here's the part that turns everything upside down. Their system was not a worse version of yours. It was aimed at a different target entirely. Your justice system is a truth-finding machine. It is designed for strangers because a modern killer and a modern victim's family can walk out of the same courthouse and never share a room again for the rest of their lives. You can afford to spend 2 years establishing exactly what happened because nothing is burning while you do it. Your ancestors could not afford that for a single day. Those two families had to hunt together next week. Their children would marry each other. In a group of 30 people, an unresolved grudge is a fire under the floor. So the system was not built to discover the truth. It was built to end the danger fast and put everyone back in the same circle. Fingerprints solve a case. Cattle solve a feud. They were not failing to build forensics. They were solving the harder problem. And you still run their software. Think about the last real conflict in your family, your workplace, your group chat. Did anyone struggle to work out who did it? You knew within an hour. What you actually spent the next 3 weeks doing was working out how to keep everyone in the room afterwards. Who talks to who? Who apologizes? What has to be given up so it can finally be over? That instinct to gossip until the group agrees is not a character flaw. Bohm argues it is the oldest legal technology your species owns, the thing that lets small groups control dangerous individuals long before anyone invented a badge. Every restorative justice program running today, where offender and victim's family sit down in the same room, is a rediscovery of something that is hundreds of thousands of years old. Your ancestors did not lack a way to solve murders. They had one so effective that they only needed a fire, a circle, and a night. You wake up to shouting, and you already know that the shouting is not the emergency. The shouting is the system starting up.